Okay? So for our objectives, again, we will explain the concepts and principles of learning. We're done with Pavlov. So we're going to discuss the theories of Thorndike, Skinner, Tolman, and Bandura today. And then, of course, we will. So again, class, we're done with Pavlov's classical conditioning. If we can still remember, this is a learning process that. So for today's video class, we will discuss the remaining four theories under behaviorism. Actually, yung classical conditioning ni Pavlov, yung connectionism ni Thorndike, and yung operant conditioning ni Skinner's, it falls under behaviorism, whereas yung purposive behaviorism ni Tolman and yung social learning theory ni Bandura, it falls under neo-behaviorism. And later on, we will further discuss the difference between these two. Okay? So let's talk about class Thorndike's Connectionism. Edward Thorndike class was an influential psychologist who was also referred as the founder of modern educational psychology. He was also best known for his famous box experiments with cats, which led him to the development of the law of effect. And yung research niya, it focused on the connection between stimulus and response, which is commonly known as the SR theory of psychology. And in his research class, he conducted experiment on animals, particularly cats, as well as the dogs, to study their behavior and learning process because his goal was to understand how animals learn and how their learning can be applied to humans, particularly in the field of education. Okay. Another thing that we shall remember is that this connectionism, it emphasized the significance of reinforcement and punishment in shaping behavior, like articulating that behavior that is followed by a positive consequences is more likely to be repeated, while yung mga behavior naman that is followed by a negative consequences, these behavior are less likely to be repeated. So when we say kasi reinforcement, it means you are increasing a behavior, and when we say punishment, it means you are decreasing a behavior. So reinforcement class, let's all remember that it can be positive or negative, and yung punishment, it can also be positive or negative. Okay. So here is the puzzle box experiment of Thorndike class. For his box experiment, together with the cat, Thorndike put hungry cats inside the cages with automatic doors that could be opened by pressing a button inside the cage. At first, di ba, when the cats were placed in the cage, the cats display unsystematic trial and error behaviors because these cats are trying to escape. They scratch the box, they beat the box, no, and they wandered around the cages without identifiable pattern. And then Thorndike then put some food like fish outside the cages to act as a stimulus and reward. And then the cats tried with different ways to escape the puzzle box and reach the food. And then eventually, class, the cat found out that whenever the lever was pressed, the cage will open. And then when the cats had escaped, the cats were put inside again the box. And then once more, the time it took to escape in the box was noted. So in successive trials, class, the cats now learned that pressing the level would have favorable consequences. And that is yung food or yung fish outside the box. So after many repetition of being placed in the cages, like around 10 to 12 times, the cats learn to press the button inside the cage, no? Which will then will lead in the opening of the doors, no? Allowing the cat to escape the cage and then reach the food or the fish. So that's how the puzzle box experiment works. Okay? Okay, so again, class, no, the theory of Thorndike is based on the principle that learning occurs through the association between a response and a stimulus. Okay, so according to Thorndike, learning is the result of the strengthening of the connections between stimulus and a response. No, it is like the more a response is reinforced, the stronger the connection between the response and the stimulus. Okay? And some of the key principles of Thorndike's theory includes these three. The first one is the law of effect. The second one is the law of exercise, the law of readiness rather, and the third one is the law of exercise. So let's discuss more about these theories of learning and how this can be applied to educational or classroom setting. So the first one's class is the law of effect. And this law of effect states that the behaviors followed by pleasant or rewarding consequences are more likely to be repeated, while yung mga behaviors that are followed by the unpleasant or punishing consequences are less likely to be repeated. Like mauulit ang behavior kapag rewarding ang consequences. Hindi mauulit ang behavior kapag ang punishment ay unpleasant. No? For example, ang consequences ay unpleasant yung naging result. Okay? So how can we apply the law of effect in the classroom or educational setting? So the first one is through positive reinforcement. Like when a student completes their homework on time, as teachers, we can praise them or provide small rewards such as, for example, extra time for break or a sticker, no, sa mga intermediate, sa mga primary, sa elementary level, no. And this positive consequence increases the likelihood of the students completing their homework on time in the future because they receive rewards. Okay? So the second one is yung negative reinforcement. Like for example, if a student consistently noisy, no, disrupts the class, we may implement a rule where the disruptive student loses privilege, such as, for example, the opportunity to participate in the fun activity after the discussion. Okay? So, kasi by removing this negative consequences when the disruptive behavior stops, the likelihood of the disruptive behavior decreases. Okay? Just, for example, kapag positive reinforcement kasi, may nare-receive yung mga bata, may ibinibigay tayong reward as teachers para maulit ang behavior. Kapag negative reinforcement naman, something like may tinatanggal tayong reward or privilege para hindi na maulit ang unpleasant behavior. And the third one is through the punishment. Like for example, if a student engages in cheating during a test, they might receive a consequence such as a lower grade or detention, di ba? And the unpleasant consequence of receiving a lower grade serves to decrease the likelihood of cheating behavior of the students in the future. Okay? So the next one class is the law of readiness. And this law states that learners must be physically and mentally prepared for learning to occur. And this includes not being hungry, mga learners natin, di sila gutom, they are not sick, or having other physical distraction or discomfort. Kasi di ba mentally, of course, our learner should be inclined and motivated to acquire the new knowledge or skills. Kasi if they are uninterested, if they are not interested, this law states they will not learn effectively. Okay? So overall kasi this law emphasizes that our learners' reception and orientation are key prerequisites to successful learning. Okay? Like the right mindset and adequate foundation enables efficient take up of the new lesson. Okay, so how can we apply this concept in educational or classroom setting? So the first one class is through the scaffolding. Like as teachers, we can provide structured support to help our students reach higher levels of readiness. And this can involve breaking down complex tasks into smaller or more manageable steps and gradually increasing the level of difficulty as the students become more proficient. Okay? For instance, di ba, when teaching writing skills, we might provide templates or sentence starters to help our students organize their thoughts, no, before gradually removing this support as students become more confident in writing. Okay? The second one naman is through activating prior knowledge. No, as teachers, we can tap into students' existing knowledge and experiences to make new lesson more meaningful and accessible. For example, before introducing a new topic, we might engage students in a discussion or activity that relates to their prior experiences or interests for us makatulong sa kanila to help them create a foundation for learning. For example, class, in math class naman, di ba? Students who have mastered basic arithmetic might be ready for more advanced concepts like, for example, college algebra, no? While some of our learners, they might need more practice with the basic operations. Okay? And then the third one is through interest-based learning. So as teachers class, we must capitalize on students' interests and passions because it can increase their motivation and readiness to learn. Okay? Lagi natin tatandaan that we can incorporate topics or activities that align with students' interests into our lesson so that we can make the learning experience more engaging and relevant. For example, sa science naman, di ba? A science teacher might design a lesson on ecosystem using examples from local environment that students are familiar with or interested. Okay? And the last law, class, is the law of exercise, and this law states that connections are strengthened through repetition and practice. Again, through repetition and practice. Like the more often an association between stimulus and response is practiced, the stronger the connection it becomes. Okay? Like in a classroom setting, this principle can be applied in various ways to enhance learning and reinforce concept. Okay? Kasi yung repeated exercise of learned lesson, it strengthens class retention and fluency over time. So, again, the question is, how can we apply this concept on educational or classroom setting? So the first one, class, is through repeated practice. Like we can provide students with opportunities for repeated practice of skills or concept. For example, in a language class, no, yung mga students natin, they might engage in regular vocabulary drills or grammar exercises to reinforce their understanding and retention of the material na ginagamit natin. The second one is through spaced repetition. Like instead of cramming information into one session, we can space out practice session over time to strengthen the memory and retention of our learners. For example, in a history class naman, di ba, yung mga students natin, they might review key dates and events periodically throughout the semester or throughout the grading period rather than just reviewing it before the exams. Okay? Next, the third one is through interactive activities. Because class, let's always remember that incorporating interactive activities and games into lessons can provide students with engaging opportunities to practice new skills and concepts. For example, class, a math teacher might use math games or simulation to help students reinforce their understanding of mathematical operations and problem-solving strategies. That's number 3. And the last one, class, is yung application-based learning. Okay, let's always remember that because encouraging that we need to encourage students to apply newly acquired knowledge and skills in real words because it can reinforce learning through practice. For example, in a science class again, di ba? Yung mga students natin, they might design and conduct experiments to apply scientific principles learned in class which reinforce their understanding through hands-on experience or hands-on activities. Okay? So that would be all, class, for Thorndike's Connectionism. Again, tandaan natin yung tatlong laws of learning na ito, not just for this course, for this SEM, no? but for the rest of our lives because magagamit natin yung mga theories of learning na ito ni Thorndike kapag tayo ay nagpa-practice na at nasa field na tayo, nagpa-practice na tayo ng ating mga profession. Okay? So the second one class was the operant conditioning of B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner class was one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, and he is regarded as the father of operant conditioning. But his work, of course, was based on Thorndike's law of effect. But si Skinner kasi nag-introduce siya ng new term into the law of effect, which is yung reinforcement, because according to Skinner, a behavior that is reinforced tends to be repeated or strengthened, whereas yung mga behavior naman that is not reinforced tends to die out or be extinguished or it weakened. Okay? Si Skinner, he pioneered the science of behaviorism. He discovered the power of positive reinforcement in education, and he also invented the Skinner box. Okay? He also believed that learning involves shifting in overt behavior, and a change in human behavior occurs as the outcome of a person's response to stimuli. Kasi 'di ba we have two types of behavior class, no? Balikan natin yung tikal. We have two types of behavior. The first one is the covert behavior, and the next one is the overt behavior. Yung covert behavior, this refers to the internal thoughts or motives that results in outward overt action. Whereas yung overt behavior naman, class, it refers to the outside acts that follow the inside thought or intention and are apparent or obvious to others. So meaning to say, pag sinabi nating overt class, these are observable behavior because this is an outside act. Okay? Okay, class. So si Skinner, he studied operant conditioning by conducting experiments using again animals which he placed in a Skinner box, which was similar to Thorndike's puzzle box. And this Skinner box, class, also known as an operant conditioning chamber, was a device he designed to study animal behavior, particularly the principles of operant conditioning. And this Skinner box, class, typically consists of a small enclosed chamber with a lever or key that an animal can manipulate, along with devices to deliver stimuli such as food or water and sensors to record the animal's responses. And the box itself, class, could hold a small animal such as rat or pigeon. Okay? And then the box also contain a bar or key that the animal could press in order to receive a reward or receive a food, something like that. Okay, so there are several key concepts in operant conditioning. Actually, there are four types of operant conditioning that can be utilized to change behavior. The first one is the positive reinforcement. The second one is the negative reinforcement. The third one is the positive punishment. And the last one is the negative punishment. So let's discuss more of these components of operant conditioning and how can these components can be applied to educational and classroom setting. Okay, so let's talk about first reinforcement. Reinforcement is any event that strengthens, again, that strengthens or increases the behavior it follows. So there are two kinds of reinforces, no? And in both of these cases of reinforcement, the behavior increases. The first one is the positive reinforcement, and this occurs when a desirable stimulus is presented after a behavior, like making it more likely to repeat. For example, giving praise or rewards such as sticker or extra free time during break to students who complete their assignments on time, no? Because it can increase the likelihood of them doing the same behavior again. Another thing is that, for example, we praise our students for completing their homework on time, and then this praise serves as a positive reinforces, increasing again the likelihood that the student will continue to complete their homework punctually in the future. Okay? Another example is that yung um Yung what else ba? Yung mga student natin who actively participates in class discussion, and then as teachers, we give them a sticker on their participation chart, no? And yung mga stickers na yan, magsaserve yan as positive reinforces na mag-encourage sa mga students natin to continue engaging in classroom discussion. Okay? So that's positive reinforcement. Sabihin, mayroon tayong binibigay na something rewarding to them. Okay? When we say naman negative reinforcement, this involves the removal, again class ha, removal of an aversive stimulus after a behavior, thus strengthening that behavior. Okay? An example in the classroom setting could be allowing a student to, for example, skip a homework assignment if they consistently demonstrate good behavior, no? Kaya nare-reinforce natin yung positive conduct. Another example is that yung mga student who are consistently demonstrating good behavior during class. So as teacher, we remove previously assigned homework, yung mga assignment as assigned homework to them, and yung removal ng homework na yon, it serve as a negative reinforces na nag strengthen ng kanilang tendency to exhibit positive behavior. Another example, yung mga student who has difficulty focusing in class. So the teachers, as teachers, we allow them to sit in a quieter area of the classroom away from distraction. So by removing the aversive stimuli, which is yung distraction, we reinforce the desired behavior of staying focused. Basta again, class, na tatandaan natin kapag positive, may ina-add tayong gusto ng mga students. Okay? Pag positive reinforcement, something rewarding to them. Kapag negative reinforcement, may tinatanggal tayong ayaw ng mga students. So in both ways, no, whether it is positive or negative reinforcement, no, na i-strengthen yung behavior and more likely maulit because of the reinforcers. Okay? Now, class, let's talk about punishment. Punishment, class, involves the application of an aversive stimulus following a behavior leading to a decrease in the likelihood of that behavior na maulit-ulit. Okay? So there are positive, two kinds of punishment. The first one is the positive punishment, and then the second one is the negative punishment. Okay? When we say positive punishment, class, this occurs when an aversive stimulus is added after a behavior. So na-decrease yung likelihood of the behavior na maulit-ulit. For instance, giving detention to a student who disrupts the class can decrease the frequency of disruptive behavior ng students na yon. Another example is that yung a student who is talking out of turn during the class. So as teacher, we give them a detention as a consequence for disrupting the lesson. And then yung detention na yon, magsaserve yun as a positive punishment because it adds an undesirable consequence, which is yung detention nga, para ma-decrease yung likelihood of the students talking out of turn in the future. Okay? Next one, class, another example is that yung student who is caught cheating on a test, and as a consequence, we deduct points from their overall score, and yung deduction na yon, yung points na nadeduct sa kanila, it serve as a positive punishment because it adds an undesirable consequence, which is yung malulower yung score nila para ma-discourage yung cheating behavior. Okay? When we say naman, class, negative punishment, this involves the removal of a desirable stimulus following a behavior resulting in a decrease in the likelihood of that behavior na maulit-ulit. Okay, for example, taking away recess time from students who misbehave. This can lead to a decrease in disruptive behavior. Another example is, for instance, during group work, a student is being disruptive and not cooperating with their peers. So we take away their privilege of working with their friends for the rest of the week. And this removal of desirable stimulus, which is yung working with friends, it serves as a negative punishment aiming to decrease the likelihood na maulit yung mga disruptive behavior na yon. Another example is that may student na constantly using their phone during class despite na may mga warnings tayo as teachers. So we confiscate the phone for the whole day, 'di ba? And by removing the desirable stimulus, which is the phone, we apply negative punishment to discourage the student from using their phone during the class. Okay? Matatandaan natin, when it comes to the punishment, positive punishment, may dinadagdag tayong ayaw ng mga students. Okay? But when it comes to the negative punishment, may tinatanggal tayong gusto ng mga students. But class, be careful on giving punishment kasi kailangan positive ang ating discipline inside the classroom. Okay? Okay. So aside from those components of operant conditioning class, si Skinner, he also studied different schedules of reinforcement. So again, no class, reinforcement is not necessarily a straightforward process, and there are a number of factors that can influence how quickly and how well new things are learned. So in other words, the timing, again, class, the timing and frequency of reinforcement influence how new behaviors were learned and how old behaviors were modified. Okay? So si Skinner, he identified several and different schedules of reinforcement that impact the operant conditioning process. So the first one is the continuous reinforcement process, and this involves delivering reinforcement every time a response occurs, continuous, like every time mayroong response, may positive response, bibigyan natin siya ng reinforcement. Like according to Skinner kasi 'di ba, learning tends to occur relatively quickly yet the response rate is quite low. So yung extinction in here, it also occurs very quickly once reinforcement is halted. Okay? The second one is yung fixed ratio schedules, and these are the type of partial reinforcement, like responses are reinforced only after a specific number of responses have occurred. And this typically leads to a fairly steady response rate. For example, as teacher, we implement a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule by rewarding students with a sticker, with a candy, or with a chocolate for every 5 homework assessments na na-complete nila. So, after every fifth assignment na nasubmit sa atin, yung mga student natin, they receive positive reinforcement in the form of sticker, in the form of candy, or in the form of chocolates. And this schedule encourages consistent performance and can lead to a higher rate of responding. Kasi naisip ng bata na, oh, after kong makalimang submission ulit, makaka-receive ulit ako ng reward from the teacher. Okay? So the next one is yung fixed interval schedule, and these are another form of partial reinforcement. Okay? And reinforcement here occurs only after a certain interval of time has elapsed. Okay? So yung response rates dito, it remain fairly steady and start to increase as the reinforcement time draws near, but slow immediately after the reinforcement has been delivered. Ano example nun? For instance, a teacher implements a fixed interval reinforcement schedule by providing, for example, a pop quiz at the end of every week. No? So if students study consistently throughout the quiz, they will be prepared for the quiz and receive positive reinforcement in the form of good grades. Okay? Ito yung mga surprise quiz, no? Iba kasing tawag doon, pop quiz. Okay? So, kapag nagbibigay tayo ng pop quiz at the end of every week, no, if yung mga students natin, they study consistently throughout the week, they will be prepared for the quiz and receive positive reinforcement in the form of good score or good grades. Okay? And this schedule often leads to a scallop response pattern, like with behavior increasing as the reinforcement time approaches. Okay? So the fourth one is the variable ratio schedules. These are also a type of partial reinforcement that involve reinforcing behavior after a varied number of responses, and this lead to both a high response rate and slow extinction rates. For example, A teacher na nag-employ ng variable ratio reinforcement schedule by randomly giving out tokens for exemplary behavior throughout the week. Okay? So yung number of tokens required to earn a reward, it varies each time. Okay? Kaya yung mga students, no, they are motivated as they never know when they might receive reinforcement. Okay? So this schedule tends to produce high and steady rates of behavior. Okay? And the last one, class, is yung variable interval schedule. These are the final form of partial reinforcement, no? Wherein yung schedule dito, it involves delivering reinforcement after a variable amount of time has elapsed, and this also tends to lead to a fast response rate and slow extinction. For example, class, a teacher uses a variable interval reinforcement schedule by, for example, randomly giving out praise and recognition for student participation during class discussion. The timing of the reinforcement is unpredictable, so as the teacher might provide feedback after various intervals of time. And this schedule encourages consistent engagement throughout the class, diba? Throughout the class period, and reduces the likelihood of students becoming disengaged after a specific interval. Okay? Okay, class. So that's how operant conditioning works. And we're done with the behaviorism, which is yung classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and yung connectionism. By the way, class, no, if we're going to differentiate the difference between classical conditioning and operant conditioning, tandaan natin that classical conditioning is learning by association. Again, classical conditioning is learning by association. Like, a person or animal learns to associate two stimuli causing a behavior to change. Okay? Wherein a neutral stimulus is paired with an unconditioned stimulus that naturally triggers a response. So over time, the person responds to the neutral stimulus as if it were the unconditioned stimulus, even when presented alone. Okay? So the response is involuntary and automatic, and ang naging example natin dito yung nagsasalivate na dog, okay? Na nagre-respond siya, nagsasalivate siya at the sound of a bell, which is yung neutral stimulus after it has been repeatedly paired with the food or yung unconditioned stimulus. Okay? And yung operant conditioning naman, class, kung yung classical conditioning is learning by association, ang operant conditioning is learning by consequences. Again, class ha, ang operant conditioning is learning by consequences. Like in learning by consequences, behavior is learned based on its outcomes or consequences. So the learner is active and the response is voluntary. Like for example, behavior followed by a pleasant consequence or reward is more likely to be repeated, while yung mga behavior naman that is followed by unpleasant consequences or punishment is less likely to be repeated. For instance, yung if a child gets praise, yung praise na yun ay yung pleasant consequences for cleaning their room, which is yung kanilang behavior, they are more likely to clean their room in the future. Okay? So these are the theories under behaviorism, yung classical conditioning, connectionism, and operant conditioning. So let's now move on to the neo-behaviorism that stands in between behaviorism and cognitivism. So there are two theories of theories reflecting neo-behaviorism that stands out. The first one is yung purposive behaviorism ni Edward Tolman, and the second one is yung social learning theory ni Albert Bandura. Both these theories are influenced by behaviorism, which focus on external elements in learning. Again, no, itong mga theories under neo-behaviorism, these theories are influenced by behaviorism, which is focused on external elements in learning, but their principles seems also to be reflective of the cognitive perspective disruptive, which is focused on more internal elements. Kaya nga 'di ba sinabi ko kanina, yung purposive behaviorism saka yung social learning theory, it falls in between behaviorism and cognitivism. Okay? Nakuha natin, class? Kasi 'di ba again, these are influenced by behaviorism, which is focused on the external elements in learning. But yung mga principles ni Tolman and ni Bandura seems also to be reflective of the cognitive perspective, which gives more focus on the internal element. Okay, class. So let's now talk about Tolman's purposive behaviorism, which was developed by Edward Chase Tolman. Okay, which is a significant, also a significant theory in the field of psychology during the early to mid 20th century. Okay, so this purposive behaviorism offered a unique perspective that combined elements of behaviorism with cognitive processes, focusing on the idea that behavior is driven by purpose and that organisms actively engage in the learning process to achieve specific goals. Okay? Si Tolman, he was best known for his influence of cognitive behaviorism and his research on cognitive maps and the theory of latent learning. Okay? So yung purposive behaviorism class, it has also been referred to as assigned learning theory and is often seen as the link between again behaviorism and cognitive theory because he believed, si Tolman, no, he believed that learning is a cognitive process. Okay? And learning involves forming of beliefs and obtaining knowledge about the environment and then revealing that knowledge through purposeful and goal-directed behavior. Okay? Another thing is that class, he also stressed the relationship between stimulus rather than stimulus response. Kung yung mga nauna nating diniscuss under behaviorism such as yung classical conditioning and yung connectionism ni Thorndike, ang sabi doon, di ba, relationship between stimulus and response. Si Tolman, sa kanyang purposive behaviorism, in-stress niya yung relationship between stimuli. So, between stimuli, stimulus to stimulus. And he said that a new stimulus no becomes associated with already meaningful stimulus through a series of pictures. So there is no use for reinforcement in order to establish learning. So kung ang sinasabi sa operant conditioning ay napakahalaga ng reinforcement, 'di ba? Same goes with the connectionism, dito sa purposive behaviorism, ang pinuput forward ni Tolman, there is no need to use reinforcement in order to establish learning. Okay? So class, here are the key concept of Tolman's purposive behaviorism. The first one is learning is always purposive and goal-directed. The second one is cognitive maps in rats. The third one is latent learning. The fourth one is the concept of intervening variable. And the last one is reinforcements. Reinforcement is not essential for learning. Again, let's discuss more how this can be applied or reflected in the educational or classroom setting. Okay, so this is the first one, class. Tolman asserted that learning is always purposive and goal-directed because he held the notion that an organism acted or responded for some adaptive purposes. Kasi naniniwala si Tolman that individuals do more than merely respond to stimuli. Like they act on beliefs, they act on attitudes, and they act based on the changing condition. And they always strive for towards achieving the goals. And Tolman saw behavior as holistic, purposive, and cognitive. So in an educational context class, as teachers, we can apply Tolman's idea by encouraging students to set goals for their learning. Okay? Kasi by setting clear objectives, goals, and outcomes, yung mga students natin, they may develop a sense of purpose and direction. Okay? For example, as teacher, we might ask students to set academic goals for the whole semester or for the grading period, such as achieving a certain grade or mastering a specific skills. Okay? Okay, so the next one class is yung cognitive maps in rats, okay? In his famous experiment ni Tolman class, one group of rats placed at random starting location in the maze but the food was always in the same location. And then another group of rats had food placed in different location which always required the same pattern of turns from their starting location. And then the group that had the food in the same location performed better. Again, the group of rats that had the food in the same location performed better than the other group, supposedly demonstrating that they had learned the location rather than a specific sequence of turns. And this tendency class to learn location signified that rats somehow form cognitive maps according to Tolman that help them perform well in the maze. Okay? He also found out, si Tolman, no, that organism will select the shortest or easiest path to achieve a goal. Okay? Another thing that Tolman proposed is the idea of cognitive maps, yung mental representation of spatial relationship and environmental layouts. Okay? So according to Tolman class, organisms develop cognitive maps through exploration. We develop maps through experiences which enable us to navigate our environment effectively. And these cognitive maps, it influence our behavior by guiding us towards to achieve our goals. Okay? So, yung concept na ito ni Tolman on cognitive maps can be applied to help students understand complex concepts. No? So as teachers kasi, we can assist our students in creating mental representation or visual diagrams to organize information and understand the relationship between different concepts. Like for example, di ba, in a history class, yung mga students natin, we might task them to create timelines o kaya concept maps to illustrate the sequence of events or the connection between historical figures and events. Okay? Okay. So the next one class is the latent learning. Latent learning class is a kind of learning that remains or stay with individual until it is needed. It is learning that is not outwardly manifested at once. So according to Tolman class, it can exist even without reinforcement. So again, one of Tolman's most famous experiment involved rats navigating a maze. And he demonstrated that rats would develop a cognitive map of the maze even if they were not reinforced with food during their initial exploration. And this phenomenon class, known as the latent learning, suggests that learning can occur without immediate reinforcement and that the knowledge gained remains latent until a relevant incentive is present. Okay? So if we're going apply this to human learning, an example for this is, for example, yung 2-year-old nating baby sister or baby brother, they always see us operate the TV through remote control, and then they observe how the TV is turned on or how the channel change whenever we use the remote control, or even how the volume was adjusted using the remote control. And after sometimes, 'di ba, surprise tayo on the first time that our baby sister or yung mga kapatid natin no holds the remote control and they already know which button to press for that function. So through latent learning class, the child knew the skills beforehand even though she has never done them before. Okay? And as teachers class, we can incorporate Tolman's notion of latent learning into teaching strategies also. Like even when students are not immediately rewarded for their action, learning can still occur. Okay? For example, a student may learn new vocabulary words through reading without receiving direct reinforcement, and then later, when the student encounters a vocabulary quiz, the previously learned or yung latent learning or yung previously learned words nung student, nung na-receive ng student, become evident, demonstrating nga yung latent learning. Okay? Okay, so the next one class is the concept of intervening variable. Intervening variables class are variables that are not readily seen but serve as determinants of behavior. Like for example, si Tolman, he believed that learning is mediated or is influenced by expectations, by perceptions, by representations, by needs and other internal or environmental variables. For example, sa experiment ni Tolmans doon sa rats, 'di ba? He found out that yung hunger, okay? Yung hunger was an intervening variable. Okay? So how can we apply this or how it is reflected in the classroom setting or in the educational setting? For example, at the beginning of the unit on fraction, as teacher, we give students pre-assessment to assess their understanding of the topic. And this serve as stimulus, yung pre-assessment na yon. So what are the intervening variables, no, na pwede nating ma-take note on that stimulus? The first one, class, is yung prior knowledge ng mga bata. So yung kanilang existing knowledge and experiences with basic arithmetic operation, these serve as intervening variable, and this includes their understanding of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. The second one is the second intervening variable is the expectation. So students' expectation about their ability to learn fraction can also influence their engagement and effort. Okay? And the third one is yung cognitive maps. Okay? Because as students learn fraction, they develop mental representation or cognitive maps of fraction concepts such as relationship between fraction, equivalent fractions, and fraction operations. Okay? And the last concept, class, is reinforcement is not essential for learning. So Tolman concluded that reinforcement is not essential for learning, although it provides an incentive for performance. So in his study, si Tolman, he observed that a rat can acquire knowledge of the way through a maze to develop a cognitive map even in the absence of reinforcement. So overall, class, yung purposive behaviorism ni Tolman, it provides valuable insights for us as future teachers to understand and support student learning in diverse educational settings. So by recognizing the active role of learners in goal setting and cognitive processing, we can create environments that facilitate meaningful learning experiences and promote academic achievement. So that's all for Tolman's purposive behaviorism. Okay? Okay, class. So now let's move to Albert Bandura's social learning theory, or also known as social cognitive theory. This is a theory that emphasizes the importance of observational learning, imitation, and modeling in human behavior. And Bandura developed this theory in the 1960s, and since it became one of the most influential theory in the fields of psychology and education. So this social learning theory, it proposed that learning occurs again through observation, imitation, and modeling, and this is influenced by factors such as attention, motivation, attitudes, and emotions. So this theory accounts for the interaction of environmental and cognitive elements that affect how people learn. So this theory, class, suggests that learning occurs because people observe the consequences of other people's behavior. So this theory, class, no, it moves beyond behavioral theories, which suggest that all behaviors are learned through conditioning, and cognitive theories, which also consider psychological influences such as attention and memory. So according to Bandura, no, class, we observe behavior either directly through social interaction with others or indirectly by observing behaviors through media. And actions that are rewarded are more likely to be imitated while those that are punished are avoided. So ulitin ko ha, class, no? So according to Bandura, nakakapag-observe tayo ng behavior either directly through social interaction with others or indirectly by observing behavior through media. And yung mga actions na nare-rewarded, they are more likely to be imitated, while yung mga actions naman na napapunish, they are more likely to be avoided. So, yung theory na 'to ni Bandura, it added a social element arguing that people can learn information and behavior by watching no other people, known as observational learning. And this type of learning class can be used to explain a wide variety of behaviors, including those that often cannot be accounted for by other learning theories. Okay? Okay. So there are three core concepts at the heart of social learning theory ni Albert Bandura. First is the idea that people can learn through observation. Next is the notion that internal mental states are an essential part of this process. And then finally, this theory recognizes that just because something has been learned, it does not mean that it will result in a change in behavior. So sabi nga ni Albert Bandura, 'di ba, learning would be exceedingly laborious, not to mention hazardous, if people had to rely solely on the effects of their own actions to inform them what to do. This is Bandura's explanation in his 1977 book, which is yung Social Learning Theory. So let's now explore each of these concepts in greater depth. So the first concept class of social learning theory is that people can learn through observation. Okay? So people learn by observing the behaviors of others, including the consequences of those behaviors. And Bandura class argue that individuals can learn new behaviors and acquire new information by simply watching other people. And one of the best known experiments in the history of psychology involved a doll named Bobo. And in here, Bandura demonstrated that children learn and imitate behaviors they have observed in other people. So yung mga bata, sa study na to ni Bandura, they observe an adult acting violently toward a Bobo doll. So when the children were later allowed to play in a room with the Bobo doll, they begin to imitate the aggressive actions they had previously observed dun sa mga adult na yun. So the Bobo doll experiment class, it proved that children can learn through observation and later, after matuto ng mga bata through observation, later they imitate the same behaviors with a combination of environmental and cognitive processes. Okay? So what else? What else do we need to remember under this concept? Bandura also identified three basic models of observational learning. The first one is the life model, the second one is the symbolic model, and the third one is yung verbal instructional model. Class, listen to me. This is a very important. When we say a life model, it involves an actual individual demonstrating or acting out a behavior. Live, actual individual. When we say naman class symbolic model, it involves real or fictional characters displaying behaviors in books, films, television, programs, or online media. Symbolic model, ito yung mga real or fictional character na nagdi-display ng mga behavior sa mga nababasa nating books, napapanood natin o sa different online media platforms. Okay? When we say naman verbal instructional model, it involves description and explanation of a behavior. Okay, so as you can see now class, observational learning does not even necessarily require watching another person to engage in an activity kasi hearing verbal instructions such as listening to a podcast, this can also lead to learning. And we can also learn class by reading, di ba? We can also learn by hearing, or we can also learn by watching the actions of character in the books and in film. So in a classroom setting class, yung social learning theory na to ni Bandura, which is yung people can learn through observation, can be observed in various ways. So the first one is through teacher modeling. Okay? as teachers, di ba, we often serve as models for our students. For example, di ba, we might demonstrate problem-solving strategies, we might demonstrate effective communication techniques, we might demonstrate proper study habits, and then students observe these behaviors and they may imitate these behaviors in their own academic work. Okay? Another thing is that through peer modeling. Okay? Students also learn from observing their peers. For instance, if one student successfully solve a math problem using specific method, other students may observe and adopt the same method in their own problem solving. So that's peer modeling. Okay, the third one is video demonstration. Diba? As teachers, we may incorporate videos or multimedia presentation that depict desired behaviors or skill. For instance, a video showing a group of students engaging in a productive discussion. It can serve as a model for effective communication and collaboration. Okay? Another thing is yung role-playing activities, di ba? Yung mga role-playing activities na yan, it allows students to observe and imitate behaviors in a controlled setting. For example, in a language class, di ba? Students might engage in role plays to practice conversational skills. Okay? Observing their peers' performance can help them learn new vocabulary and grammar structures. Okay? And then the fifth one is yung observational learning of social norms. Okay? So in addition to academic skills, student also learn social norms and expectation through observation. For example, mga students natin, they may observe how their peers interact with each other and with the teacher, and then they adjust their own behavior accordingly to fit in with the classroom culture. Okay? Okay, so the next concept class of social learning theory is that mental states are important to learning. Okay, again, mental states are important to learning. Si Bandura kasi class, he noted that external environmental reinforcement was not the only factor to influence learning and behavior because he realized that reinforcement does not always come from outside sources. Kasi meaning to say, no, our own mental state and motivation play an important role in determining whether a behavior is learned or not. Kasi si Bandura had described intrinsic reinforcement as a form of internal rewards such as pride, satisfaction, and a sense of accomplishment. And this emphasis, no class, on internal thoughts and cognition helps connect learning theories to cognitive developmental theories. Okay? Kasi 'di ba while many textbook place social learning theory with behavioral theories, Bandura himself describe yung approach na to, describe yung social learning theory as a social cognitive theory. Okay? Okay, so the third concept of social learning theory is that learning does not necessarily lead to change. So how do we determine ba when something has been learned? Kasi in many cases, learning can be seen immediately when the new behavior is displayed. Like when we teach a child to ride a bicycle, we can quickly determine if learning has occurred by having the child ride his or her bike unassisted. But sometimes kasi class, we are able to learn things even though that learning might not be immediately obvious, ba? Kasi mga behaviorists na yan, while they believe that learning led to a permanent change in behavior, observational learning demonstrates that people can learn new information without demonstrating new behavior. So ano yung mas magandang example para mas maunawaan natin? Tignan natin itong scenario in a middle school classroom. Okay? In here, the teacher is conducting a lesson on the importance of environmental conservation. The lesson includes discussion, presentation, and video presentation highlighting the impact of human activities on the environment as well as giving some strategies for reducing ecological footprints. Now, anong naging learning? So during the lesson class, yung mga students na yan, they learn about concepts such as recycling, reducing energy consumption, and preserving natural habitats. And they gain knowledge about the consequences of environmental degradation and the importance of sustainable practices. No? So through observation and discussion, students absorb information about environmental conservation. So what is the lack of immediate change? So despite acquiring knowledge about environmental issues and potential solutions, tandaan natin that not all students immediately change their behavior. For example, some students may still continue to waste resources. Some students may still continue to litter, or some students may continue to engage in activities that contribute to environmental harm, even after learning about the importance of conservation. And this lack of immediate change, it does not mean that learning did not occur. Rather, it only reflects the complexity of behavior change. Kasi may mga factors tayo na nakaka-influence sa change. For example, this includes various factors that may influence whether learning leads to behavioral change. For instance, yung attitude, yung values, yung habits, and social norms. No, these all plays significant roles in influencing change. Okay? Nakuha, class? So additionally, yung availability of resources, level of social support, and perceived efficacy of conservation actions, these can affect yung willingness ng mga students and ability to adapt environmentally friendly behaviors. Okay? So what are the potential for future change? Although hindi siya nag-lead ng immediate change, may mga potential naman for future change. Like, although immediate behavior change may not be occur for all students, the knowledge and awareness gained from the lesson lay the foundation for potential future change. Kasi over time, with continued exposure to environmental education, positive reinforcement of sustainable behaviors, and shifts in social norms, these may contribute to gradual changes in students' action and attitudes towards conservation. And in this example, Bandura's jury highlights that learning about environmental conversation in the classroom does not guarantee immediate behavioral change. Instead, behavioral change is influenced, of course, by a complex interplay of individual, social, and environmental factors, and may occur gradually over time. Okay? So, class, it is important to note that not all observed behaviors are effectively learned. Why not? Kasi factors involving both the model and the learner can play a role in whether social learning is successful, and certain requirements and steps must also be followed. So, the following steps, yung nakikita natin sa ating screen, involve in the observational learning and modeling processes. So the first one, tandaan natin to ha, class, yung key factors for social learning success. The first one, ARMM. Again, ARMM, attention, retention, motor, reproduction, and motivation. So the first one is attention. So in order to learn, you need to be paying attention, because anything that distracts your attention is going to have a negative effect on observational learning. The next one, class, is retention. Retention is the ability to store information, which is also an important part of the learning process. Retention, class, can be affected by a number of factors, but the ability to pull up information later and act on it is vital to observational learning. Okay? Next is motor reproduction, no? So once you have paid attention to the model and retained the information, it is time for you to actually perform the behavior you observe. Okay? So further practice, class, of the learned behavior, it leads to the improvement and skill advancement. And the last one, motivation, no? So in order for the observational learning to be successful, you have to be, again, class, motivated to imitate the behavior that has been modeled. And again, reinforcement and punishment play an important role in motivation. Okay? Okay. So how can we apply these factors for social learning in the educational setting or classroom setting? So here is the scenario class. For example, in a high school classroom, a teacher is introducing complex mathematical concept to students. Let's say it's a concept in calculus, no, that involves integration by parts, no, a topic that many students find it very challenging, of course. For example, sa attention. Dito tayo sa attention. So first step, some students in the classroom are highly attentive, focusing intently on the teacher's explanation, and these students are actively engaged, making eye contact and mentally processing the information. Then they are more likely to effectively learn from the teacher's demonstration. Okay? So as to the retention, sa next step na tayo, as the teacher explains the concept, some students may struggle to retain the information due to distractions or difficulties with concentrations. However, others who are actively processing the information are more likely to retain it. For example, a student who takes detailed notes, di ba? Kaya lagi ko kayong pinagte-take down ng notes eh. Kasi as students who takes detailed notes, ask questions for clarification, or mentally rehearses the steps of integration by part is more likely to retain the information. Okay? Next is yung motor reproduction. So after the teacher's explanation, yung students, they are given practice problems to solve independently. And those who paid close attention and retained the information are better able to reproduce the steps correctly when solving the problems. And they can apply what they observe on the teacher doing to their own work. Okay? And the last one is yung motivation, no class? It's the student's motivation that plays a significant role in the learning outcomes. Kasi di ba, some students may be intrinsically motivated to learn calculus and are eager to understand the concept. Yung others naman, they may lack motivation due to factors such as perceived difficulty or disinterest in the subject. So tatandaan natin, no class, motivated students are more likely to pay attention, retain information, and actively engage in reproducing what they have learned. Ulitin ko ha, class. Motivated students are more likely to pay attention, to retain information, and actively engage in reproducing what they have learned. So in this example class, it emphasizes on the importance of mental states in learning through observation. It is very evident. Okay? And yung students' attention, retention, motor reproduction, and motivation, it significantly influence their ability to learn and apply these concepts even in a classroom settings. Okay? So overall, class, no, Albert Bandura's social learning theory help us to understand how our environment and the people around us shape our behavior. Okay? It explained how individuals develop new skills and behaviors by paying attention to the behavior of the others and then trying to reproduce that behavior themselves. Okay? And let's all be reminded that it is indeed an important theory for us educators and anyone interested in human behavior and development. Kasi magagamit natin ito kapag tayo ay nasa field na ng ating profession. Okay? Okay, class, so that's all for today. Again, we're done with the theories of learning under behaviorism and neo-behaviorism. So get ready with your 20-item quiz next week. Okay, and then your task for this week is already posted in our Google Classroom. See you next week. Happy weekend!